ladies and gentlemen, I am super pumped to talk to someone who I would like to think has become a friend of mine over the last couple of weeks as we've been working on a project together. The Jon Von Zyle is an artist who is known for his love and passion for Alaska. He is the official artist of the Iditarod since 1979. He's received international acclaim far beyond the borders of our country. He's received awards from the Audubon Society, the Benjamin Franklin Award. He's been inducted to the Iditarod Hall of Fame, which I'm going to get to in just a minute. That was in 2004. And he's received governor's awards and many, many, many other awards. So I'm humbled and honored. He's an artist, and that's what he's most known for now. But he has lived the life of a musher for decades and decades. He is what the young people today call the OG. He's an original gangster. He's one of the he's the real deal, and I'm just really, really happy to have him on board. How's it going, Jon? I waited until you pulled up your coffee to ask you how you're doing.
Yeah, I'm doing okay. I see you just took a drink too. You know, this took us, I don't know how many years to figure out how this old man can do this. You know, sorry about that.
We had to teach your Mac how to speak Google, and that was a process. And I appreciate you being patient with me. For those who might not be familiar with you, Jon, can you just start from your childhood? And for those who aren't watching and are listening, Jon, you're 81 or 82, is that right?
I'll be 82 in November.
So born in the
I'm 81 and 3/4. No.
Okay, and born in the height of World War II. That'd been right around that time, right?
Yeah, 42.
Okay, so just tell us about yourself. That I don't even know. I've read your bios, but I never saw where you were born. Were you actually born in Alaska, or did you move there?
No, I was born in. I have a twin brother, Dan, and we were born in. Actually, we were born between Petoskey and Little Travis Bay, Michigan, which is up not on the highest peninsula, but just on the highest part of Michigan.
And how long were you, I remember reading that your mother had dogs. Were they hunting dogs or sled dogs?
No, my mom raised. We left Michigan when we were, little tiny kids. I'm gonna call him my old man because I never knew the guy. He basically, I don't want to say abandoned because that's maybe not a nice word, and I don't care, but he did, and went in the Marines and didn't die, but never came back. And my mom took my brother and I to live in Dryden, New York, at her parents' house.
And is that where you started your love affair with art?
Yeah, my mom was a really good artist. Never did anything with it. Women in the 40s, 30s, 40s, never, they didn't do that, but they didn't do, art. But she was very, very good. We never, I never went to art school. Just basically natural, talent
Sure.
or whatever you want to call it. And she encouraged it a lot. She also, she was a single mom. We didn't have a lot. We had good food because she hunted and fished every day of her life.
No kidding.
To basically feed a couple of, young robins who are living in Alaska going,
Which is something else that you'd say that women, aren't really thought of as having been doing back in that time. So she was a real, she picked things up.
Oh, she was one tough woman. You
A
know, it's
flapper,
I still
flapper,
I huh?
a
Pardon me?
flapper, a flapper.
Well, I don't know if she danced, but I never saw her dance. But and I know she didn't. Did you say flapper as in,
Yeah, from the 1920s,
yeah.
1930s.
No, I don't. I never saw her in a dress. So, always coveralls and jeans and, pants. Um, where were we?
So you were talking about how she was a gifted artist
Oh, yeah.
and a hunting and fisherman too.
Yeah. Yeah. She hunted and fished a lot. I don't want to say every day, but, almost every day.
That's awesome.
We eat a lot of deer and a lot of uh, game and, bunnies and you name it, fish. That's one of the things I miss about Alaska is I used to love panfish, and you guys got them there in Maine, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Good old
someday I'm
Brookings.
going to, go back and sit in a boat and yank up
Well, that's
bluegills.
yeah. I'm not much of a fisherman, but on Father's Day weekend, my boys took me, and we are known here in Maine for our cold water fish species here.
Mhm.
And my boys took me out fishing on Eagle Lake here, and we had a good time last Saturday.
Yeah,
So did the art? I remember seeing somewhere that you said that if there was something wrong with your work, your mom would say, "It's not right, go fix it," but she wouldn't tell you
yeah.
what was wrong. Explain that to me.
Well, she kind of was a lady of few words. she, um, she didn't really, she never went to school for it either, so she didn't know any more than I know.
So,
She
like
just knew,
proportions and things like that, she'd see something was off in that way.
yeah. I mean, she had a natural ability, and if it was wrong, she said, go back and do it again. She didn't know how to teach, and she probably wouldn't have taught anyhow. But you learn by doing, and you learn by your own mistakes.
Mhm.
You know.
That's yeah, that's true. So I looked up your twin brother for the first time in my life. I just went to Hawaii with my wife. My wife has family in Hawaii, and
Oh, where?
we just Oahu, and
Okay.
we just returned a couple about a month ago from Hawaii. I didn't want to go. I'm not a tropical kind of person, but I really did fall in love with the place.
Yeah.
It is kind of a paradise, and that's where your brother lives. And I see online that he's also now quite the accomplished artist as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Dan, about 10 years ago, lost his wife Rosie, Rosalind. And Dan and Rosie started their own advertising agency, 50 years ago. And then, maybe 10 years ago or so, he he sold the advertising agency, but he was his agency was small, but had a lot of huge, clients. He's very, very good.
Excellent.
And
Yeah,
he went from that to, I don't want to say gallery paintings, but gallery paintings.
from what I saw online, it definitely seems like he's a good artist as well.
Yeah.
Before we dive into your art, though, I want to ask what brought you to Alaska and what got you into sled dogs? How did you go from living in New York with this very pioneerish? It sounds like she's a true pioneer spirited lady to being a musher in Alaska.
Well, mom had when we got to as babies when we got to New York State. Um, there was an older lady who lived next door to my grandparents, and she was probably 50 or so. When we were little tiny kids, and she asked if we would. She kind of took my mother and us, excuse me, under her wing. And so we moved out into the country area between Dryden and Ithaca. And my mom started her own because she'd always had dogs all her life.
Okay.
But she started a kennels of working collies.
Okay.
And, a lot of people in today's world really don't know that collies used to work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and, the show dog stuff is,
Or
you know,
Siberian Huskies and Malamutes, for that matter.
yeah, 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 yeah. How true is that? Yeah. Um, but anyhow, so she had working collies, and her collies basically were, she didn't train them, she bred them. She did some preliminary, response work, but most of it was breeding and a little bit of response work, and then she would sell to the farmers, etc. Um, and but she always wanted to come to Alaska. At least that's my story. There's two or three versions, and I'm telling it. So
Every family has two or three versions of every
yeah,
story. So
yeah. And but so in the 50s, and again, she had her kennels, and it's pretty successful for. Uh, I don't want to say a woman, but pretty successful for, that time and age, and a young kennel, so to speak, as opposed to 50, 100-year-old, kennel. Um, so mom was real successful, and some of my favorite times with her, I think it was every Sunday. We would, jump into bed with her, or we'd sit at the coffee table or whatever, and she would talk to us about dogs,
okay.
uh, attitude, uh, everything that was important to a working dog. And so she wanted to come to Alaska too, or at least that's my story.
Yeah. And it's a
And
good
we
one.
we started there in the 50s. Car broke down in Colorado. Uh, had to stay there for a while, and eventually went to Lakewood High School in near Denver, a suburb,
Mm-hmm.
back in the 50s, 60s. Graduated from high school in 61. Uh, Dan and I uh, had always wanted to be Marines because my old man was a Marine. And
Right.
even though, we never knew him, it was kind of a thing.
Yes, sure, of course.
Yep. But mom had some problems with, him and the Corps treating her
Yeah.
uh, badly.
Yeah.
So we honored that and went into the actually it was a National Guard, Army National Guard,
Sure.
um, and enlisted in 1960. They deferred us until the day after graduation in 61. And 61 and June 13th or whatever, we were in the army now. You're not
Yeah, yeah,
behind the plow.
that's right.
So anyhow, got out of the army, went to Mesa Junior College in Colorado.
Okay.
Uh, got my first husky in Mesa. My girlfriend and I got this dog, named her Sheba. She wasn't pure. She was probably 89% Siberian and mutt. The rest of it. Um, and I trained her. Well, she was 6 months old when we got her, maybe. Um, Made a harness for her, and she would pull me to school on my bicycle down the street, and so that's kind of how I got into dogs. And then in graduate or never did graduate from college. Um, my mom, trying to remember the sequence. When Dan and I were in school, mom had a stroke, and so we quit school and took care of her. Couldn't get good enough jobs in Denver to pay for all of the doctors and stuff.
Hmm.
And had a friend who lived in Hawaii, and he got us jobs, construction jobs. We went to Hawaii, uh, sending money back to her, and after a few months, the construction company went belly up, and I got a job with Sears as a display man. um, was in that job for about a year and got
So
a
we're talking
promotion.
window displays, right? The
Pardon
the
me?
big win the big window
Yeah, windows.
displays.
Yeah, windows. Interior store displays. All of that.
Neat.
Um, did a good job and got promoted to assistant display manager in Portland. At that time, I bought four Siberian Huskies from a
So
kennel that was.
you're already bitten by the bug. You're
Oh yeah,
starting to
yeah.
clean
Oh
at this
yeah.
point.
From I don't know 12. No, but whatever. But yeah, no, I enjoyed the dogs and I enjoyed that kind of workability and that attitude in them, you know, which is kind of sad to say, lacking in today 90% of them,
For
you know.
sure. For sure.
But so anyhow, uh, bought four dogs from a kennel in Oregon who was basically a working kennel and had dogs from Earl and Natalie Norris
Hmm.
in Alaska.
Sure.
Um, uh, Working dogs. And
Sure.
then I raced in, quote unquote, raced in Oregon and Washington and California, Nevada, I think. Maybe a couple other states.
Hmm.
And then got a promotion from Portland to Sears to become uh, basically I was a job superintendent, and I was designing stores, the Sears stores, the new ones and the remodels at their headquarters in LA.
Okay.
And I designed them, and then I
LA,
designed one.
LA wasn't a great place for sled dogs, though.
No, but actually they had some decent, what I guess then was called kart racing.
Sure.
And California actually had some, I mean, for a young, hot area dog stuff, it was kind of neat.
That's good.
Um, and so now, I forgot where I was.
So you were talking about your promotion and
Oh yeah,
leading
and
up
so
to.
I would design the stores and then go to supervise the construction of them. I had, 300-400 tradesmen working under me and managing the budgets, etc. Um, my boss at Sears, the main guy in California, he always knew I wanted to come here,
Hmm.
and we got talking one day, and I said, you know, I got to get home. I got to get to Alaska, and he says, well, there's no jobs up there for you, and I said, make one, and he did. so, so in '71, I came here to Alaska, as a display sales manager for the Sears store here,
So you
which is
took a demotion in order to get to Alaska.
actually they called it, well, money wise was better,
Oh, that's good.
um, and um, they call it, and I never figured this out either, but they said it was a promotion because even though I was in charge of, let's say $1 million when I was designing and building stores, um, when you're in your own store, they called that a promotion. To me, it was a demotion, but I
Yeah.
didn't care. I was here.
Yeah. So you got there. You were in 71. About how old were you then? Close to 30, I'm guessing. A little over
Yeah,
30.
yeah. Actually, I think I was either 29 or 30, give or take.
And to bring so obviously that was a great mushing move for you. What was going on in your artistic side of your life during those years with
Well, let
Sears?
me finish a little bit briefly on the thing. So one of the stores I built, or actually two of them I built, was in Salt Lake City,
Okay.
and I moved up to a little tiny ski resort above Salt Lake,
Mm,
and I had my four huskies, and we used to go. I'd hook them up, and I had a dog sled, and I hook them up, and I'd run down the road just a little ways, and I'd turn right through the woods, and I'd run over, I don't know, let's say 5, 10 mile, whatever it was, to a little tiny ski resort, little tiny actually a ghost town by the name of Park City,
okay.
which is now huge and
Right.
multi billion-dollar houses and
Yes.
but anyhow, but I was still running dogs back in the states. So we get up here with my four dogs, and I buy dogs from Earl Norris, and I buy dogs from a gentleman by the name of Daryl Reynolds.
Okay.
Daryl had basically the same dogs that Earl had, through his own lines.
So for
Um,
those who aren't familiar, the Norris family is really well known for having some good working line Siberian Huskies and keeping the working side of the Siberian Husky line going for quite a long time. Um, and so you were still fairly committed to the working side of the purebred class at that point.
yeah, I never really was involved in the show dog stuff. My mom didn't like what the AKC had done to the collie,
Yes.
and being her son, you just you follow those examples, so you know how that works.
I do. Actually, as you know, for the last 3 years, I've been the president of the International Sepala Siberian Sled Dog Club, and there's actually been quite a bit of debate as to whether we ever want American Kennel Club recognition for that very reason, because every breed that gets inducted and then put into the show ring ends up being bred for show. And as you know, uh, form follows function, but function doesn't always follow form,
Yeah.
and that's where it goes right. Which leads me to a question I've been dying to ask you, since we're at this point here. Some of the heroes in the breed that I've spent a lot of my time working with over the last 25 years, I've been working with Sepala Siberian sled dogs, and some of the heroes: Doug Willett, Jeffrey Bragg, McFowle. I'm too young to have known McFowle, but you actually got dogs from him. Could you tell me anything about that part of your story?
Yeah, Earl, and I think this is right. I mean, it's been so many years ago,
Hmm.
but I think Earl bought out what was left of the McFall kennels, and I don't remember the year,
Hmm.
but I Earl loaned me a couple of dogs for a Iditarod and other things, but one of the dogs that he loaned me was a dog by the name of Bashful, and she was very shy, uh, almost spooky, but one heck of a dog.
Hmm.
Um, I ended up purchasing her. She loved me. Nice dog.
That's
Um, he eventually got out of her shyness because, I mean, she was at Earl's with 200 dogs, and me, she was with 20. So a
yeah,
lot of difference. Um,
yeah.
so, but I believe that that Bashful came from the last of his kennels,
Gotcha.
and
Yeah, and
that's what I mean. I really
I know
remember Earl saying that, but
I know Jeffrey Bragg got some of his original stock from McFowle, and then Willett actually. Doug Willett actually got some seps not only from Bragg, but he also had a connection with McFowle too. So I just
Yeah.
when you told me that in emails, that was so cool. I mean, to be talking to someone who, because obviously McFowle before him was Wheeler and before Wheeler was Seppala. So, to have this conversation with you and, you having those dogs so close. I've gotten dogs directly from Bragg over the years, and I got dogs that had the Sepulta name of Doug Willett on them from his breeding as well. But that's just really cool to me. I think that's really neat.
Do you remember not Willett, the other guy? You have to excuse me. My mind is starting
Jeffrey
to.
Bragg.
Yeah,
Jeffrey
Jeff.
Bragg.
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
Jeff had a dog by the name of Ditko.
yes, of course.
Yep, which to me was probably one of the best put together dogs ever.
Hmm.
And
Some
I don't
beautiful
remember
dogs.
anything what happened to him or anything, but I remember seeing a picture of him.
Well, yeah, I can tell you what I've been working hard on doing. Obviously, in my breed, and I'll say this, and then we'll get back onto your story. There was a split between the American Seppala breeders and the Canadian Seppala breeders, and the American Seppala breeders kind of uh, all they were all satellites of Doug Willett's, and the Canadian breeders were all satellites of Jeffrey Bragg's, and so they had a rift for a long time. My goal as the president of the club for the last 3 years has been to get everything I can from both camps and to
Yeah.
bring them back together again. So that's been my major work. So uh, so your first Iditarod, when was that?
The first actual race was in '76, or for
So
me.
so just 5 years after you came to Alaska.
Yeah. Um, so anyhow, so Daryl Reynolds, the guy that I mentioned earlier, he and I would take, because I was running dogs and Daryl had his dogs and, basically the same breed and, same lines. Um, he and I would take long winter camping trips. And so that was always kind of my mindset. I
Hmm.
raced, but I didn't have a racer's, intellect. Um, you know, and again, back in the early '70s, I started in '73, and it was basically a slog fest. You know,
Yeah.
um, I think the first 5 years of the race, the average finishing time, from first to last was like 25, 30, 25, 26 days.
Yeah.
Now it's 8 and 9. You know,
Right.
there's a couple of changes there. So
Yeah, there's been a lot of changes, and that's why obviously I've been I have several friends who are Iditarod finishers. I have one friend I went and trained with Mitch Seavey last year, who's won the Iditarod 3 times, and I picked his brain the whole time I was there. But like you, I have I'm more of an adventurer at heart, and the communion of being with the dogs and being out in nature is the primary reason why I do this.
yeah,
It's not to win races, and it's not to say that racers are better or worse, or that we are better or worse. It's just that the mentality is a little bit different, and it takes
yeah.
a little bit of a different wiring to be a champion than it does, for someone who just wants to be out there communing with creation.
Yeah, I think, the real difference between quote unquote a racer, who wants to finish first, and a traveler, a guy who's just, enjoys that, is time.
Hmm.
You know, you enjoy, 50, 60, 70 miles a day back in the old days. And, they enjoyed 75 miles a day
Yeah,
and, push, 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 push. And you and I are wired differently.
yeah.
Doesn't make any difference in dog care, nothing. It's just mentality thing,
Hmm. Hmm. And I saw
personality.
that. back in 2021 when I did the Togo 261 expedition to help raise funds for a monument here in the state. I did 261. Oh, it ended up being over 280 miles with the only 8 dogs I had in my kennel. So it wasn't like I pulled my best 8 dogs from, from a team of 30. It was the only 8 dogs I had. And I found that with 8 dogs in unpacked, we spent a lot of time breaking trail or following a single backcountry snowmobile track or something of that nature where the dogs are sinking 2 inches into the snow, and every time I get off to paddle I'm sinking 6 to 8 inches into the snow. And then the last couple days we were in overflow, way up past my shins on the lakes. I said all that to say, the average of 50 miles, we had one or two 60-mile days, a 65-mile day, but a couple 40-mile days. An average of 50 miles, that's a comfortable speed in those conditions
Yep.
for a dog team and for a human, I think.
Yep. Yep. And that's kind of what the average for the first 4 or 5 Iditarods was. The race. Because again, we were on snowshoes. I don't want to say half the time, but certainly a quarter of the time. And there was no communication or no nothing. It was just that way's known. We never got lost. We just didn't know where the hell we were. We're tough
So I
dog
mean,
muckers.
if there's no clearly defined trail, I guess that's the truth, right? I mean, as long as you're heading toward Nome, you're doing okay.
Yeah.
What about what do you see because you're still around the Iditarod a lot now as the official artist of the Iditarod. What do you see from the dogs? Like when you look at the dogs from in the 70s when you're running versus what's out there now, what's the big difference that you see?
Well, number one, actually, Dan Seavey, Grandpa,
Yeah.
when he was, I think, second in Iditarod in '73, second or third, he said the ideal dog for Iditarod is Siberian Husky. And I believe probably 90% of his dogs were, 80, 90% Husky, Siberian.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the main difference now, basically, and starting probably in the 80s, mid 80s, was the introduction of the hound dogs
Yes.
into whether it's Indian dogs, village Indian dogs or village Eskimo dogs, um, is the introduction of the Eurohounds into them.
Sure.
Um, they had problems at the first of that. One of the main problems was what they called instant death syndrome, which hound dog has the attitude of go, 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 go forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Husky has an innate ability to say, we're going to go,
Reserve.
but, we're going to go a little bit further, so I got to save something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the introduction of the strong hound dog into, a good husky, uh, that go, 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 go attitude took over.
It's funny that you say that. That's exactly, not word for word, but that was Mitch Seavey's, the way he described it as well. I didn't get to meet Dan Seavey while I was there, but I did carry his revolver in the Willow 300 while I was on the race. Mitch loaned it to me, and I considered that a big honor,
Yeah.
just because I love having that connection with the past. But Mitch said pretty much the same thing. He said the difference between your dogs and mine is your dogs they come from a very harsh environment. They have it built into their DNA to conserve themselves and preserve themselves for longevity. And whereas with a good Alaskan Husky, you have to be the regulator on them because they will run themselves ragged for you if you let them. Yeah.
The new Alaskan Husky will. And when I say new, I'm talking about 80s forward.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the old village dogs, um, Indian dogs, Eskimo dogs, whatever you want, village dogs. Um, they had a pretty good, I gotta go, but I gotta, save a little bit of attitude too. Because I had
Mm-hmm.
a few of them back
Mm-hmm.
in the day, and they
Mm-hmm.
were very similar attitude wise as the Siberian.
Yeah.
And I've always had good dogs. They may not have been the fastest and all that, but they were very work orientated.
Mm-hmm.
And we never, I never kept them in the kennel if they weren't.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
with that different mentality, you just have to run them differently, when you're
yeah,
doing distance, right?
yeah, yeah, and they don't require as much food. A Siberian eats very little compared to an Alaskan. The Hound Cross now.
Mm-hmm.
Even my dogs never used. I very, very, very had to use a boot because they had good
Yeah.
feet.
Yeah.
And I think, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you're making me laugh because it's pretty much, and I know you know this, in modern racing. My dogs. I did this whole last season with, and I put 1,600 training miles on my dogs. Not one split foot. They have really tough feet,
Yeah,
and and but if you show up at the starting chute without booties on all of your dogs, people are all like, oh, he doesn't care, blah blah blah. I'm like,
yeah,
no, that's why my dog's feet are tough, is because I've not babied them so much, and I took the time slowly and progressively to build them up.
yeah.
And when I was on expedition, there was one night where we could not get to supplies, and so and it was 25 degrees, which is hot for Siberians, and they're curled up. And then Iditarod Musher commented on the photo of us camped out on the trail, get some effing straw for those dogs. And again, the straw, it's there for the
The wood.
optics, for the people watching, because my dogs really don't care.
Well, it's there for the look and, and the PETAs, the
Yeah, yep,
PETAs type.
exactly.
And you're right about the booties. I've personally been told that, half the dogs in today's races wouldn't use the boots. It's because if you don't use them, you're cruel. Well,
Yeah, exactly.
no. And think about the amount of number one, money, and number two, the time that it takes. I don't care how fast you boot, you still, by the time you boot 16 of them, that's, what is that, 56? No, that's, I don't know, 65, whatever feet, a couple times a day. That's a couple of minutes every time you do it.
Mhm. Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, it's interesting that you saw the same things. What about between your two races in the Iditarod in the 70s? I'm just really curious about that. Like, um can you just describe briefly, like, other than the fact that you're pretty much bushwhacking it for a lot of the time, camaraderie on the trail, things of that nature versus today? Like, what are some of the other distinctives that really stand out to you?
well, I haven't been on the trail for, since 79. I mean, I've been around, but I haven't been on the trail. Um, but in 79, my last race, I could kind of see changes starting to happen. Maybe a couple new rules. We didn't really have that many rules the first few years.
Mhm.
Um, they had Later on, they had the corralling, where you couldn't, and before we stayed with the village guys, and, um, but, so there were a lot of rules, changes coming up. Um, but uh, it's changed drastically,
Mhm.
drastically.
Mhm.
Just the very fact of, the numbers of days tells you something.
Yeah. Yeah. For better or for
That
worse.
alone. You know.
Yeah, and I know that the management is great in that race, with all the veterinarians and everything that's on hand. But from what I've heard of the early days of the Iditarod, it was pretty much a communal camping trip until it hit the coast, and
Mhm.
then it started to turn into a race there. Would you say that's right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we I, sometimes I tell people about the big holes along the trail, and you'd be going along, when when you're in trees or something, you'd be going along, and if you halfway fall asleep, you'd fall into I don't know, 5 foot deep hole that a bunch of guys have been camped at. And, and that's kind of what we did, and you could build a fire and
Yeah.
the fire burns down to the ground and the snow's 5 feet deep. So you got this big pit that if you're not careful, you fall into, Um,
Yeah.
but it was to picture it like that, that's wrong too. I mean, we had great camaraderie, but we also had really hard push times, you know.
Sure.
Um,
In
uh,
some way, in differently, but you guys were breaking trail, like you said,
yeah.
snowshoeing, and the level of grooming that all racers these days come to expect in the trail. You guys didn't have that, right?
And I love the word expect. you know, yeah. When you expect something, it's not good. You know, you should not expect anything. As far as I'm concerned. You know, but yeah, it's drastically changed. Which is okay. Not for me, and probably not for you, but it's okay. I mean, it's the way
Yeah,
life is.
it's a different kind of adventure. Yeah,
Yeah,
just a
yeah.
for a
And
different kind of person.
the quote unquote the kids of today, they complain about, oh, I'm so tired. I've been on the trail for 8 days and I got 20 hours of sleep. Try 30 days or 25 days with maybe an hour a day. You're
Yeah,
tired then. Now don't talk to me about being tired.
yeah,
You know.
yeah.
So everything's relative.
Yeah, for sure. Before we swing back to your art, I have to ask you about Hope 91. I am really really curious. I know that you helped to orchestrate this. Did you also run it and like tell for our listeners that don't know what it was? Just describe it as though you're talking to someone that doesn't know what it was at all.
Yeah, in I think it was '89. I can't remember exactly, but I think it was '89. Um, I was invited to Siberia uh, by the state of Alaska, along with I don't know, let's say 3 dozen other people. Um, it was called the Friendship Flight, and it was the first flight into Siberia since the Second World War, and it was to ease the relationships.
Mhm.
So during the friendship flight, which was a day long, um, I talked to a anthropologist lady, and I had shotgun letters all over Siberia and Russia asking for somebody who could tell me about the Siberian Husky because nobody knew, what had happened. And a lady met me there, an anthropologist, and talked to me about that. And so during those meetings on the friendship flight, a friend and I, or a friend, Leo Rasmussen, stood up and basically challenged the Russians to a dog race. Um, and this is wrong, but 2 days later, we have Russians sitting in our living room talking about it. I mean, not true, but almost. Maybe it was 3 days. Um, and but they had to run it really like right now because they had already committed money to it, etc. Um, we really started seriously talking about it and doing it in 1990. um, a year later. Um,
And this was still just to put this in perspective. This was still Soviet Union. This wasn't just Russia. This was Soviet Union.
yeah, it was, and I don't know where the border lines and what the politically correct wording is. To me, it's always been, that area of quote Russia has always been Siberia.
Sure.
I
Yeah,
don't know
yeah,
what it is, but
yeah.
um, so we basically went. It took us Leo Rasmussen, Jerry Tokar, our secretary, and our media lady, Sandy. Uh, can't remember Sandy's last name now off the top of my head, but Sandy. So the three or four of us put this together in a relatively short period of time. Um, Lots of trips back and forth from Anadyr, Siberia, or Providencia, um, just to organize it. Uh, Spent lots of money. Didn't have any money. I think we got, maybe, you know, 20, 30 grand from sponsorship. Nobody believed it was going to happen, so they didn't give anything.
Well,
And I know I personally wrote checks for another 20,000. Leo did the same. Jerry did the same. Cost a lot of money to bribe people.
yeah. Well, part of what's so unbelievable about you putting this on is the route.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to go ahead and describe the route to the listeners? I mean, just that
Yeah.
alone is one of the most epic things.
Yeah. We started in Nome. Um, at that time, the first race, the Russians are not allowed to come over. The Chukchi, the dog, Russian dog mushers. Um, but I don't remember how many quote Americans and Europeans there were, but let's just call it 10. Um, Started from Nome, went from Nome to Teller, and then from Teller to Wales, Alaska. I did not run because, as you know, organizing something takes a heck of a lot of time away from training. And I probably could have done it, but I didn't. I just didn't because it wasn't really in the cards for the dogs, etc.
Mhm.
Um, I would have loved it, but I enjoyed putting it together too.
Sure.
But I was the only quote official that went over on the actual race, in charge, so to speak. Um, we went, and then we stayed in Wales, Alaska. Supposedly, the Russians are going to come over in helicopters to pick us up and take us across the Bering Sea. You cannot safely travel the Bering in that area. Uh, we get 30, 40, 50-foot tides. That area is narrow,
Sure.
and you can either do it or you can't, and if you can't, you're drowning. So we opted to
Sure.
fly. Um, they
Yeah.
came over in helicopters, picked us up, landed in Uellen, which is a wonderful little Chukchi dog team, or dog Chukchi native Chukchi village. Most of the villages were, I don't know, 200, maybe 500, people. Um, Saw relatively very, very few quote unquote real Siberians. A lot of them were, just mutts, that they
Hmm.
conjured together and made a dog team. Their dog teams are tough, tough, tough. Um, they're used primarily for hunting,
A
dragging
lot like
walruses.
the Greenland dogs and Canadian Inuit dogs. That just they're tough because they have to be tough to
Yeah,
survive, right?
yeah, yeah, and they're used. I mean, they're not used for racing; they're used for work. And you know, there in Siberia, most of them are used for. hunting and dragging the walrus, whale, whatever they hunt, back to the village, the fox farm, feed the fox farms, and or the people. And so it's an everyday thing.
Hmm.
So anyhow, so we went from Llewellyn. Basically, I had planned the race because I kind of was in charge of that section of the trail, or the operation. Um, and we went from Llewellyn, basically following the coast, to Anadyr, Siberia. Some people call it Anadyr, but it's Anadyr. Um, and I think it was about 30 days, if I remember correctly, it took us. Um, Again, expedition wise, we did not want to do race because the
Yeah.
Chukchis don't know how to race. They know how to travel, but they
Hmm.
don't know how to race. And this was part of the learning process. Um,
Right. And that winning a race wasn't the primary goal, right? You were
no,
trying to build, yeah,
yeah, it
build
was
some
peace and, yeah, development, between the two countries. The race is still going on. Uh, I don't know if it's called Hope, and hope in Russian is Nadezhda. Nadia, you remember Nadia Comaneci? Well,
yes.
that's her first name was Hope. You know, um, uh, it's under a different name and a different format now, but it's still going. What is it? 30 years, almost. 25, 30 years. Every year, they've changed the trail occasionally in different places. And it's never been, it was about 1,000 miles, maybe 1,200 miles initially. Now it's, 8, 6, 8, 5.
And do
But it
you
was a
feel
wonderful trip.
do you feel like that Hope 91, that and launching that, do you feel like it achieved its goal to some extent? Because during that time there was a lot going on, right, with hockey, in the Olympics between Russia and America, and there's this all of the Soviet Union and America. The Cold War was still going, and in that context, do you feel like that this did what you were hoping that it would do?
Yes, definitely. I don't know about today, with all that problem going on, um, and the way that our government is handling, the whole situation is not what I would
Well,
call great,
you know, by modern standards, you're still young enough to run for president, so you should.
Um, I'm sorry, what direction am I going?
You probably have better foreign relations.
I've
Well,
been
so
advised that we should not get into politics, although I would love to,
yeah, so
because we got the same thoughts going on.
so you're so all this time, and this is going to be, I'm going to dive deep here, and I'm going to ask you a really deep philosophical slash theological question. I know one of your really great works of art is where you have a dog sled team, and it's you. It's an event that actually took place with you, and you've got in the ether of the sky above you. You see a spiritual form up there, and so as someone who loves adventure in the outdoors, and I'm an artist too. My art has been music and writing, poetry, that kind of thing. I'm not a visual artist. I'm more of a linguistic artist and a musician. But there's something to me that seems to connect all of that. There seems to be a thread between the spiritual, the art, and the outdoors, and the adventure. Could you maybe speak from from your perspective how all of that ties together with you?
I think simply said, to say it simply is that unless I'm doing a kid's book, you know, um, I very, very, very seldom paint anything that I have not physically done. I don't use photos. I mean, I might every now and then if I'm going to paint, Denali or something that a million people, you got to look at that and refer to a photo. But I just don't use photos. Everything, whether it's bird art or fishing or hunting or whatever, dogs, it's all my own experiences.
Mhm.
And it's easy for me to, I don't know, conjure up or whatever, what this memory was and do it.
Mhm.
Um, I think that lends some credence to the work. Um,
I believe it does.
yeah. I see, back, yeah, I've been lucky enough to be nationally published, internationally published by art publishers.
Mhm.
And, I used to travel a lot with the really, really, really famous guys. And you could tell all the work that they did. And, some were better than others, obviously. Um, you could tell who'd been there
Mhm.
and seen whatever they painted or
Mhm.
experienced whatever they painted, as opposed to those using a photo, let's say, or
Yes.
photos to put together a scene.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know why. It just to me it feels better to paint what I've seen and done.
So my college roommate, he ended up living with me for a couple years after we graduated. He had a master's in photography and a master's in painting, and he was really great at doing portraits of people. And I remember the day that he let me see his process, and he was using a digital projector to project the photo onto the canvas, and then he'd sketch the person he's doing the portrait of from the photo that's being projected on it, and then he'd shut it off and start to add the layers. And I told him, I said, "You're cheating." I was like, "That's
Mhm.
cheating." And I know it's not cheating. I know that's just a different art form. But when you do it from memory and you do it from heart and all like that, um, I really I respect that a lot. I find that really commendable. And do you feel like there's a spiritual side to how your art and your adventure and all of this combines for you?
I don't know, John. To me, spiritual is a religious thing. I'm spiritual. I'm not religious necessarily.
Hmm.
I certainly believe in God and Jesus, the whole bit. I'm
Sure.
just not, religious, religious.
Yeah.
Um, I think, I think that,
I'll tell you the reason why I'm asking. I was watching one of your interviews, and someone asked you whether you were just with that particular painting, were you just hallucinating because you were tired? And you smirked and you said, "Well, maybe," which made me feel like you feel like there's more than just what's there, and that's why I
oh,
wanted to
well,
ask you.
definitely, yeah, I definitely believe that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You live to be 82, that there's something besides, something that you can
That's
see, yeah.
that's right.
Um, yeah. No, and I don't mean to belittle anything. It's just I do what I do,
Hmm.
and if it works, if it doesn't work for the viewer, that's okay too. I care, but I don't care.
Hmm.
I'm just putting down something that happened to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now it that changes with if I'm doing I've done like 50 kids. I've illustrated like 50 kids books, adult books.
Right.
Obviously, if I'm doing a kid's book on Santa Claus, well, I personally have not seen Santa Claus in a very, very, very long time. So there's that side of it too.
Uh-huh.
It's not an
Sure.
experience necessarily.
Sure.
I try to only accept books that will take me back to something that I have experienced. It's not always true, though, you know. Um, but I, I just personally feel that it's better to do things that, you know, I think I might remember that painting that you're talking about.
Mhm.
Um, and I can't remember the year. I think it was,
It was about
I
8 or
think,
9 years ago.
yeah. But I think we were talking about, or whoever was interviewing or whatever was talking about, is I did a painting. When I came back from my Iditarods, I would do 20 paintings about that particular race.
Okay.
I did a painting. I don't remember what year it was, but what race it was. Um, and it showed a very small dog team, um, and a big ethereal,
Mhm.
spooky looking face in the sky.
And you said you were hearing voices.
Yeah, yeah, yep. That's the one. Yep. Um, that happened. I mean, I can't tell you whether it was true or not.
Mhm.
I may have been hallucinating. I may not have been.
Mhm.
I don't
Mhm.
know.
Mhm.
Um, but it really happened.
Mhm.
And that was the only way that I could, you know, you can't paint a hallucination unless you're painting something on
You have to
the,
you have to do
yeah,
a
you have,
representation of it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful experience. Wonderful experience.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. So, we'll come up for air, and I'll ask you something a little easier. Of all the mediums out there, why acrylic? Why have you chosen that that's going to be your medium?
I spent a little bit of time in Hawaii. Uh, I don't remember. 63, 64. I don't remember, what years, like a year or so. And acrylics had just come out.
Mm. Okay.
And, before it
Vibrant
was,
colors.
pardon me.
I was just saying and the vibrant colors that come along with that.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And so I picked up a couple of tubes, a black and a white,
Oh,
and I painted an old Hawaiian man. From then on, that was it. They
very.
dry now. You either do it or you don't. There's no drying time. It's, I don't want to say instantaneous, but it's, pretty quick. Um, and I use uh, a method called glazing. you you're painting relatively few colors, but you're painting transparent colors upon transparent colors that
To add
make,
depth.
yeah.
Mhm.
And basically what happens is that, let's say you got 20, 30 layers of transparent paint. The light travels through those transparent, 20 layers, let's say, hits a
Wow.
white background and
Mhm.
bounces back at you. And
And
that
makes
gives
you
you
feel
the
like
depth.
there's light coming from the
Yeah,
makes you feel like there's actually light coming from the painting at that point.
right. It also gives you the depth. Um,
Interesting.
and I'm really fast. I have to paint 70, 80 paintings a year. Um, so I don't dawdle much.
That's awesome. And acrylic allows you to do that, right? Because I know, like my friend I graduated with, he would spend 6 months on one painting. He did
Yeah.
oil, and you just would not be able. Your art. You want to create all the time and be creating frequently, because the numbers that I've been hearing from you and from your interviews that I've listened to, you produce a lot of work, and that's
Mhm.
really excellent. And you couldn't do that with other mediums so much, huh?
No, no. Yeah, I don't mean this the way it sounds, but I'm fast, and you almost have to be. um, 70, 80 paintings a year, contracts for 2 books a year or whatever,
Yeah.
you don't get into quote unquote that corporate world without producing,
Yeah.
you know,
Well,
whether you want to or not, you do it,
that's right. Yeah, and that's it's the same with writing and with music. I mean, you have to practice an instrument whether you're feeling it today or not. And
Mhm.
as a writer, you need to sit down and write whether you're feeling it today or not. And some days you feel it more than others. So I definitely understand that. And it sounds like you're at a place in your life now where you can choose passion projects that appeal to you, and if it's not something that you're interested in, you just pass it on by for something that you are. It seems like it's a good place to be.
Yeah, we're happy. Yeah.
That's
Oh, and by the way, you being a writer, you need to write something about your trip.
yes, sir. And I'll
And
have.
I have an illustrator who just might want to illustrate your journal. I
I was
don't
about
know.
to say I'm definitely going to be begging someone that we both know that's on this call right now to use their art for the cover of said book.
Well, not only that, but if you make it a journal kind of a thing, which it should be, kind of. Um, I I I'd love to illustrate a journal too, and I have, but I mean, I would love to.
That I'd love to talk to you about it. I did for the Togo 261 expedition back in 2021. I do have a book out there on that, and it is just that. I took what I do when I'm out at the end of every day, just like the old explorers did. I would make a journal entry for that day of the things that I don't want to forget about that day,
Yeah.
so that when I come home, I can expand on it. But I have those original journal entries, and so I'm definitely planning on doing that again. But speaking about the expedition that's coming up and other things you've got that we've got going on, what about you? What is your current passion project? What are you working on? What are you excited about? You mentioned something about a cruise. I'm really interested to hear about that.
Oh, yeah. Well, right now I haven't got contracts, but I will have for 2 more books. One a kid's book, and then well, actually 3 books, and then two about uh, Iditarod posters and stuff, and part of my career, uh, autobiography kind of things, um, and uh, the cruise. Oh, I used to do well. In fact, I've done lots of fabric designs and clothing designs and yeah
Okay,
stuff. Um,
neat.
the uh, the cruise 2 years ago, Iditarod came to me and said, we're poor, poor us. What can we do to, earn money? And yeah, same old story, And um, Jonna suggested that we do a cruise, a charity cruise, and that would raise money for Iditarod. And so we started it, but then eventually didn't get any much cooperation from Iditarod. So we still gave it to the foundation and a junior Iditarod and Cancer Society because
Okay.
Jonna had just fought cancer and that was close to us.
Mhm.
Um, so anyhow, so Barbara Carpenter, the lady who is our tour director, super. If you're ever on a cruise or need somebody to direct, get a hold of Barbara. She, she will either bowl you over or get out of my way because I'm doing this type of thing, lady.
That's all.
Um, so anyhow, we're doing another cruise in actually in another month or so in August, and this is for Junior Iditarod, uh, Junior Diabetics or Diabetes Association, and um, we're going to Southeast Alaska. Lots of goodies on board for auctions. All the money raised, 100% of it goes to whatever charities that the buyer of that product wants. They write it down and it goes to 100%. We take nothing. In fact, the cruise, I just wrote a check for, I think it was $7,000 for John and I to go on the cruise that we organized.
You're hosting. Yes, that you're
Yeah,
hosting, right?
right, yeah, yeah. But anyhow,
Such a
so
story.
that's what we're doing. That's the
That's awesome.
next thing.
So
And we're doing another.
where would people, if people wanted to join you on that cruise or find out more about it, where would they go to find that out?
Actually, the cruise is sold out.
Well, there you go. Good.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but yeah, actually they could get on a waiting list, but I think the waiting list is, long too. So
Yeah.
don't bother. You missed your chance.
And do you sell your work directly on your website? You have a very nice website, by the way. I was looking at that before we talked. Would that be where you would suggest people go to look at your work and find out more about you, or what would you prefer people do if they're looking to find out more
Well,
about
the
you?
yeah, John. The website is being redone. Our old web mistress passed away, and so we're in the process of another newer lady.
Okay.
So it's
So
not that complete.
do you
We
have someone
sell,
already? Because I've got a great web designer that is working with us for our expedition, and so if you
yeah,
needed someone,
I
let me
saw
know.
it. It's great.
He's
Yeah,
working on it feverishly, and he's doing a great job.
yeah.
And shout out to him, Richard Bailey, over in the UK, since we're talking about it. But go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, computers are a whole different thing.
Yeah.
As you and I spent an hour me trying to get down here. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But we sell. I use Facebook uh, primarily. Just people email us, or they can go to our galleries that across the country. But
Yeah, and great art. And I fully expect for you to uh, spend at least a full 50 years as the Iditarod official artist. You're well on your way there, and I'm excited to see everything that you have going. I love looking at your work. I always have, and when we connected this week, I was just humbled, honored, and excited. So I want to say thanks to everyone who's been listening. This is
John,
Jon. Yeah, go ahead.
excuse me, just for a minute. I'm going to do I don't know what they call this.
A plug?
Yeah, yeah. There was another word before that too. That like uh, senseless plug or something.
Yeah. No,
Shameless.
it's a shameless plug.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm going to show you what I've come up with. Just a sketch, sketch of the print that we're doing for you.
Oh man, it's awesome.
Hang on. Can you see that?
Yeah, that's beautiful. All except for that dude on the left, man. That is gorgeous.
Oh, I don't know who that is. That was
Well,
just
my wife said she said, Jonathan, I told her, I said, look, he came up with the sketch and put me in it, and I didn't ask him to do that. And she said, people are going to think you're vain, and so I just want to say a couple things here. I want to say, first of all, how much of an honor it is that you were willing to help us out with this fundraiser. Like, I mean, when I saw I had a message from the Jon Von Zyle, I felt like what do you call him, the groupie girl or whatever. I was so
you
excited.
immediately deleted it. Yeah.
And then when you showed me your initial draft of the sketch and I was in it, this is the other thing that I'm humbled and honored for, next to Leonard Seppala, And it's my honor to see this breed cross the 100-year finish line and to do something noteworthy for the breed, and for you to come on board and help us with that. I mean, humbled doesn't even begin to describe how grateful and appreciative I am. I really am.
Well,
And so that said, we might as well announce it now.
you're
Um,
welcome.
you are doing a print, and it's we're gonna set the price. I think we decided at 149, and there's only going to be 100 of them. So for everyone who follows the Explorer podcast or follows our kennel, or loves Togo and loves the Sapala legacy of the Serum Run, you really need to pick one of these up. There's only going to be 100 of them, and they are by the famous Jon Von Zyle. And this has been an honor. Thank you so much for taking this time today.
You're welcome. You're welcome, John.